9.
A 9. Oh, interesting. The topic we'll be discussing today is how do you use PDFs and digital game resources?
Hello and welcome to Roll for Topic. I'm Chris Salzman,
I'm Andy Rao.
and this week we're joined by Tim Saucer.
Hey, everyone.
Hey,
Welcome.
back. We wanted to have you back on, Tim. So you were on just like a couple months ago, maybe even weeks. I don't even know. Time doesn't mean much anymore. But you have just wrapped up a campaign of your own, and there's some fun stuff that you can share about that, and just some like good tips and tricks and stuff. So we want to talk about that a little bit before we dive into our topic.
You know what, can I jump in here real quick?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, this is the second kind of campaign recap that we've done so far this year. And I just wanted to explain, I thought it might be worth explaining a little bit our thinking on it. And
Yeah.
I don't know what you think about this, Chris, but I think, bringing a role-playing campaign to completion, where it doesn't end because everybody flaked out or it just lost steam, I think bring it to a point of conclusion is something to really celebrate. So, Tim, that's part of the reason we wanted to bring you on, is just to let you celebrate a little bit and reflect on your campaign. So sorry to jump in there rudely and interrupt you, but Tim, we'll now turn it back over to you. And yeah, can you give us the kind of elevator pitch of your campaign and tell us how it went?
Yes. The context behind creating this campaign was that I had been playing D&D with my kids and the neighborhood group and having a lot of fun. And it was something I wanted to do with my wife. And I wanted to share this experience with her. And I was explaining to her about what it was. And she kept asking me really hard questions like, so what's the point?
Yeah, good
I was
question.
like, well, it's to have fun and tell a story. And she's like, okay, sure. And I thought, well, maybe if I could get a couple people together and just do a one-shot, we could, see how it goes. And in order to do that, what I wanted to do was I wanted to make an environment that she was going to really enjoy. And, as some little more background, she knew a lot of people that played D&D because she worked at the Michigan Renaissance Festival for a number of years and had many, many friends. And she had definitely a very clear idea of what she thought and was not interested in that. And so I thought, okay, well, how can I make this more palatable? So I asked a bunch of women in my neighborhood if they wanted to play D&D, and very timidly asked some women in my neighborhood, and they all said yes. And so we got together, and so I started calling them the Mom Squad. And it started off as we had 5 women and 2 of their husbands who were playing honorary moms, because they all played women characters in the campaign, set in a matriarchy. And I did run a published adventure. So I ran Waterdeep Dragon Heist, so 5e campaign. And we ran that. I had to make a couple tweaks at the end for timing issues, also known as baby issues. Someone was having a baby, so we needed to speed up the end of that bit. And then we continued on after that, and kind of recently, last weekend or the weekend before, brought it to the conclusion where I did some homebrew stuff after that really kind of nicely wrapped up the campaign.
Oh, that's so great. So how long was it from start to finish then?
It was a little over a year and a half.
That's great.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, and of course the pandemic hit right in the middle. So we were meeting every 2 to 3 weeks at my house, in my basement, which is great because we all live in the same subdivision. So that everyone would just kind of walk over, hands with snacks.
That's great.
And sit in the dungeon or the basement. It's like a very, in some ways, kind of old school D&D. Your friends just coming over with snacks and sitting in the basement playing, throwing some dice, right?
Yeah.
And then the pandemic hit, and then we were meeting like every week. So like we really picked up steam because we were all stuck in our houses with our kids and nothing else to do. And then we're back to roughly every 2 to 3 weeks now.
Yeah.
So listening to you describe how that came about, I think it's a little unusual to hear of a campaign that is so specifically built around kind of the interests or expectations of the particular players. Can you talk a little bit about like what was it that your wife did or didn't want in the game, and how did that kind of affect like the published adventure you chose to run or just the type of campaign you chose to run?
it's hard, right? I mean, I know my wife extremely well because we've been together for 20 years now. And so I had a very good feeling for the kinds of things that she enjoys in general in media, and, you know, the type of topics that I think that she would find interesting. So, like, is it selfish that I gear the entire campaign around my wife? Yes, I did. Because it's very important to me that, you know, she enjoyed it. And then I also knew that I had these people in my neighborhood that well, I guess I didn't know. I thought these people in my neighborhood would enjoy the same kind of things, and it turns out they really did. And we did run a one shot, and then there was a little change up in the players. We did run the one shot. One of the people said, you know, thank you, I enjoyed it, but it's not my thing. And then another person in the neighborhood heard about it and said, I want in. So so we had a little bit of change up, and then two other people in the neighborhood heard about it and said they wanted in too. So
yeah, so I'm curious about that, right? So this is something I think every GM goes through, is you're trying to put a group together, and you're trying to identify the sorts of people that would say yes or who'd be interested in playing. I guess, were these all people that expressed some sort of interest in D&D specifically to you, or like, yeah, how did you decide, right? There's a lot of people in the neighborhood.
Right. So George, who was on a couple weeks ago, that played in the one shot on the air with me, I met him at the bus stop, and he was talking to me about role-playing game because Wendy's had just released their Wendy's RPG, right?
Oh, right. I forgot about
we were Yep.
A pivotal moment in
the
role
pivotal
playing.
moment
Yeah.
in all of tabletop gaming.
Sold out. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was chatting with me about that, and I had already been kind of floating this idea and thinking about how I would put it together. And I said, "Well, how about you and your wife? You know, would you be into it?" And he said, "Yeah, absolutely." And then the other two people that were in the one shot, one of them is the mother of two of the players in my kids group. And so I asked her if she wanted to see what it was that her kids were spending all this time doing. And then the last one is a woman that I walk to the bus stop almost every day with because she lives a few houses down and our kids get on the same bus. And we know each other pretty well from some other things we've done together. And as we were just walking and talking one day, I very nervously asked her if she would like to possibly be interested in trying this thing out. And she goes, "Oh yeah, I've wanted to for years. The boys never invited me when I was in high school. It sounded like a lot of fun." And I said, "Well, yes, it is. So yes, please come." Yeah.
That's great. So a fair number of newbies, I guess, to the game, or at least people that were aware of D&D but hadn't really played it or played it much, right?
Right. So of the seven that I had, that I started the campaign with, and then two of them had the baby and took off. But of the seven I started with, one had quite a bit of experience. I'm sorry, the two husbands both had quite a bit of experience. And then one of the moms had played a little bit of 4th edition, but she tells me that this was vastly different than what she remembers of playing 4th edition.
Yeah, so like when you're playing with new people, you know, I guess you can call them new people, but by the time they're done with the campaign, they're experienced, right? Like, so it's, you know, they're Dungeons and Dragons players, whether they like that title or not. I guess, did you find that, like, did everybody sort of run out by the player's handbook? You know, like what ended up happening as far as their, right, like from the beginning to the end, as their like experience level or just how they approach the game? Right.
So after our first session with the whole group, I think it was, I don't know, like 8 a.m. the next day, because it was an evening game. Like 8 a.m. the next day, one of them was texting me and saying, like, "Hey, which of the books do I need to buy?"
That's great.
And, you know, and she bought it. And so by the next session, everyone had the player's handbook.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
So, over half already had it anyways in their household. So, so they glommed on into it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So, and, you know, as far as, like, I'm concerned, you know, what else do they need to do to be invested in that? You know, that was pretty much it. And then they show up ready to play. And then what I noticed was pretty quickly, 3 or 4 sessions in, one of them started to bring, like, some art she found. It's like, this is what I think my character looks like. I just found some pictures and put them on the front cover of her 3-ring binder that she had for notes. I said nothing about doing anything about note taking or anything like that. I did very quickly early on start assigning different people to be the note taker for the group, who would then do the recap for the next, when we started off, which is great because they started like Google Docking and sharing, so like everyone had it.
Nerds, yeah.
It was fantastic.
I'm curious, as a GM, did you do anything different or try anything new in this campaign? Like, was this kind of were you falling back on kind of what you already knew, or did you try anything different, like either with the story or the pacing or anything like that?
There is the pivotal moment where I shifted my approach to this game happened relatively early on, and that was they had just acquired this property and they needed to hire some people, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna throw a few NPCs at them, see what sticks. And I threw this one NPC, human, Gorsha is her name, who's down on her luck, needs a job. Any job, I don't care. I'll do whatever. I just need to, I'm trying to put my life back together. And they start discussing, and half of them are like, we don't need this trouble. This is just a whole mess of trouble we don't need. Not worth it. Our rogue was totally against it. And like, no, we can find other people. And one of them, her maternal instinct kicks in, and she says, I've taken her outside to the deck, and I want to ask her, hey, when was the last time you ate? And I was like, it's been a couple days. And she's like, okay, we're getting her some food. Where are you staying? And she starts like really investing in this NPC with almost zero buy-in on my part. Like, I then had to make sure I had the name written down, because it was going to be a throwaway NPC.
Yeah.
Right. And now, by the end, she became a pivotal character. And I guarantee that if I killed off that NPC, it would hurt more than killing off some of the player characters.
Wow.
Right. And the key was I realized that this group of players is going to interact with the world in a different quality than I was used to, and I needed to respond to that. And so what I figured what I was going to do was I'm going to twist the screw a little bit on some of these things, right? Like maybe, and it was like she's going to have some hardships, this NPC, and in the end she had some love. And I think by the time this airs, there won't be a spoiler,
okay,
but the NPC is going to ask, because we wrapped up, but next Sunday we're meeting and we're doing a session of just like closing up some loose threads, and just like celebrating the end of the campaign, because last session was a huge battle and that took up the whole time. So we're gonna do half a session of just wrapping up, and one of the big one of the big things that's going to happen is this NPC that they cared so much about is going to ask the woman who, asked her, do you have food and lodging, things like that, is going to ask her to be her maid of honor, right?
Aww.
As she has put her life together in some way.
That's so great.
it is great. And it's
I'm like
something
tearing up over here.
I know.
Maybe I
have teared up multiple times, like just playing some of these characters as I, just getting into them. Because I think I wanted this campaign to have a full gamut of experience. I wanted adventure, I wanted intrigue, and I wanted drama, which is something that I don't get with my kids group at all, right? Because they're like, oh, it's an NPC and it's moving, I should stop it.
Yeah.
Right. So this is a group. It had a very different quality to it, and I felt I needed to step up my game on the world building side to meet what I thought their expectations would be.
That's fantastic. I think, I know for myself too, I often confront that when you're actually playing a game at the table. You have these expectations about how it's going to go, and then because you're playing with a bunch of other people, like they're part of the universe too. Like they challenge you, or they change things and they tweak things, and it's such a cool, it's just a cool thing to get to do with your friends, like with your family, with your wife, and things like that. Yeah, so I'm glad that you got that experience, and it didn't just go by the book, and they had some fun. It sounds like it was somewhat of a life-changing experience.
It was a really wonderful experience, and incredibly glad I'm doing. And we got to do a whole campaign, and we wrapped up on a really amazing thing that just shows the growth of these players, because so many of them. It started off session 1 is like, okay, which die do I roll, and then how do I add that number to it, and then the last session, this big bad evil person fight, and they planned it out so well. I didn't stand a chance as the bads, because they spent multiple sessions planning this thing out, like figuring out, okay, how can I get information from this and this place and this place, and they scouted out the area in advance, and they went to the library, and they went to the temples, and they went to the rival gangs and used them, and they're reaching out to every single different faction they had any contact with, and getting them, pulling them in, to help them do this thing. And then the last session before the big fight, they asked me, the DM, to leave the room because we want to talk and we don't want you to listen as we make some plans.
Yeah. That's when you're dead. You're just dead.
Done.
Followed that up with, because there's a few weeks between sessions, like the next 2 weeks of constant texting back and forth amongst them without me. So my wife will be giggling as we're like sitting down, and I'm like, are you're making more plans, aren't you? And they had a battle strategy, they had multiple tactics, they had backup tactics, and they even planned on who was going to be the one that they were going to sacrifice if they needed to, in order to defeat. They had it so well planned out that I didn't stand a chance, and it's just incredible player growth over that year and a half. I'm really impressed.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. So when they are doing all their planning and stuff, right? So like it sounds like they went back and sort of touched on everything that you'd been doing throughout this whole campaign, setting up this whole world. You had all these NPCs and all these factions and stuff. Were you just sort of like nervously answering their questions in character, and you're trying to figure out like where are they headed with this, or like as you're sort of watching them pull all these strings together, I guess, like what were your feelings at that point?
Yes, I saw what they were doing, and there's this great thing about being DM or GM, because there's like so many different levels of suspension of disbelief, because they seem to have this belief, even though I said it at session 1, look, I'm not here to defeat you, I'm here to push you and test you and help you grow, things like that. I've got a spiel written down. I'm here to push you, and that's my goal. I'm not here to kill any of your characters. I am here to test them. I am here to put them in deadly or dangerous situations. But really, most, if not all, should be walking out of every encounter, whether it's retreating or in some way, or fighting or talking or whatever, however you get out of it. Yet, there's definitely still this idea that it's us versus him, and we need to like outthink him, outsmart him, outplan. And it's like, I'm on your side.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
as I saw that they were pulling on these threads, I was encouraging them to go down these directions, because I wanted it to feel really hard, really challenging. I wanted them to feel like they got payoff for bringing in all the different resources they had, and that right, because it's entertaining, right, to have conflict and resolution. So I didn't mind at all, and I definitely encouraged it. I actively encouraged them reaching out, and doing the things of like dropping little reminders about how, oh no, what about those goblins you saved? That type. But not so obvious, but more like, oh, those goblins, they're coming by for lunch because they think they can get some more free food out of you, that type thing. Yeah. And they were like, oh, while they're here, let's ask them if they can do this thing for us.
So I have two related questions kind of about the what's next. So one quick question is, so what did you learn? What is something you're going to do different the next time you run a game for this group? Something that you learned, a mistake that you made, or just something that is going to be different the next time you run?
Yeah, I don't know. The really fun thing is that one of the players has decided to take over as DM. So I will be a player come Sunday in a hopefully long-running campaign. For this group, at least, I am stepping down for a little. So the thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sit and learn as much as I can from a new game master, and just kind of sit back. But if I had to actually answer your question, if I had to just start a new campaign, like what would I do differently? I think that the place I definitely I would spend the most effort in is identifying what are the key direction of growth that I and the players want their character to go in. I want to put more effort in, because we were talking at dinner today, and my wife admitted to my son, she's like, I never wrote a backstory.
Yeah.
So, and that's fine, right? If you don't want one, it's fine. You got what's on your character sheet. That's great. But I think that there was a lot of payoff that came from in the process of figuring out what the players wanted their characters to become, or how they wanted them to grow, and enabling that to happen. So if I could do that more from the beginning, I think I could get more payoff early on in the campaign.
What happened the first time that something like went really badly for the players, especially for the newer players? Like, how did they handle it? Did they roll with it? Did they understand that that's how the game goes? Was there a moment of like frustration or something like that? Does any scene come to mind where something just went disastrously wrong?
Not disastrous. I think that if anything goes disastrously wrong, it's my fault, right? Because I should not be putting them in a position where if they make reasonable decisions, they're not going to be able to get out of it in
Sure.
some way. So for that respect, it went pretty well. I did learn that when you're married to someone and you have a lot of history with them, and you do something that hurts their character very specifically, that may not be the best idea. Even though it's balanced for the group, it may not be the best idea for your marriage. That just might be specific to me, though.
Yeah. That's probably a good marriage lesson in general.
Yeah. I had one more quick question along those lines, kind of, and that is, so a year and a half of running campaign, playing first every 2 to 3 weeks, and then maybe on a weekly basis. That's a long time to be running one campaign. I know as a GM, I struggle with GM restlessness, I guess you might say. Like, I will get enthused about something, we'll get a ways into it, and then I start looking at all these other cool new games that are out there that I'd like to try as well. I'm curious, like, is that an issue for you? How do you maintain your own enthusiasm for like a year and a half of weekly games? Were there moments where the whole group struggled to keep the enthusiasm or the momentum, or was that not really an issue for you?
Well, I think it was not an issue because of the pandemic, right? So when we were meeting every week, it's because we had no other, and all the people in our group have been very careful about following social distancing guidelines, and it was for some of us, our only real block of human interaction with people that weren't either coworkers on a video call or the people in our immediate family. So in a way, that the pandemic helped to prevent that, because this was our outlet, right? And I think a lot of people have experienced that, over the last year. Mm-hmm. So this was our outlet. As we started getting used to that, I bought this book that really just started making me think really differently about encounter building and things like that, and that got me all excited again. And that's The Monsters Know What They're Doing by Keith Amman. It's a super great book, and it's someone who has a background like me, where they started D&D back in first edition, and then they had a long break, as their, for me it was, joining the military, and then school and kids and stuff, and then came back to it later in life. So I kind of resonated with his with his background, and it's this person who just went through and really carefully thought about each of the different type of monsters in D&D, and what are their motivations. Like, if I look at their stat block, that actually tells me quite a bit about this thing, right? Because if it has a really low intelligence, it's not going to do the most tactically appropriate thing. It's just going to hack and slash at the nearest person. Well, if it's got a really super high wisdom, then it might be able to be like, oh, that thing is my threat. So, and he boils it down. He talks about like, okay, well, what does this mean? And then he boils it down to like some very specific tactics, which are not the same as just the actions that they have, right? It includes the actions they have. But I started reading that, and that got my imagination fired, right? So, and it's not specific to this book, right? This was the medium that got me excited again to start really thinking, oh, how can I change this up and make it more interesting and exciting, for me, and then hopefully for players too.
Yeah, that book sounds really fascinating. Did it change the way that you approached your encounters? Like, I mean, I guess, what were you doing before you read the book, I guess, and what did you start doing after?
With my kids group, there was a very poignant thing that happened. We had this encounter, and it was in a published adventure as well, different one. But there's 5 kids, or 5 players, against this one NPC who's this, this gunslinging drow, right? And it's an easy win for the kids, right? But the gunslinger did get a shot in, and one of their characters goes down. And I paused for a second. I thought, if I was this thing, and like really trying to live my life, survive another day, I'm not going to fight to the end. I'm going to fight dirty to get out of this situation. And what I said was, okay, he is going to walk away, step over the body of your unconscious friend. Go ahead, take your opportunity attacks. I don't mind. And they were like, okay. So they do. And he said, all right, he's using his action. He's going to step down. He's going to put his knife to the throat of your unconscious friend. And he tells you, back away if you want him to live. And I probably wouldn't have done that before, right? Otherwise, it would have just been another slogfest. Okay, hit, roll, and until it's dead. And the kids freaked out.
Yeah.
They were like, no, you can't do that. I was like,
why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
And then I said, okay, well, he tells you to back around the corner. Do you do that? Yes. Okay. You hear a thump on the ground. And I said, you don't know if he's still there or not. And they said, well, we're going to wait. I said, well, how long are you going to wait? 30 seconds. I said, that's fine. You get all of your death saving throws, your unconscious friend, because you're not running out there to cast any healing spells or stabilize or do anything like that. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm sorry, this is getting really into the mechanics of D&D. But, and right, I put that character on the line, because if he rolled poorly, it would have died. And that would have been it. Time to roll a new character. But the kids, it freaked them out, and it just got me really thinking about how can I make this interesting and not just let's hit and roll, that type thing, over and over and over again.
So. Yeah, what a much more memorable encounter that turned out to be than if they had just traded blows for a few more rounds and dropped him to 0 hit points and that was it.
Yeah. Right, and I'm sure if that was the case, like, they would not remember it.
That like quote from is like Mike Tyson, like everybody has a plan until they get hit in the mouth, like, yeah, because I think like in D&D you do get kind of that like back and forth, just like we're attacking like that. But I mean, like, yeah, the first time you would actually get, someone would shoot you or slice your arm off or whatever, your tactics are going to change drastically.
Yeah, so I don't know if that answered your question, but
yeah, let's actually we've been going for a little bit, but let's actually talk about the topic that we rolled about a half an hour ago.
Whoa, that's crazy talk, Chris.
Yeah, just briefly, because I think like this might actually transition pretty well, right? So like transitioning to pandemic sort of gaming, to about like PDFs and digital game resources. I mean, you already mentioned that your players got into using like Google Docs and like texting each other and some of those forms of communication. I guess, so like, did you do anything else differently once you shifted over to pandemic play with digital resources?
I love miniatures, and I build lots of terrain, and I've got lots of miniatures, and I love doing this very tactical, grid-based combat. I think it's really fun. and probably because George gave me like a really great compliment early on from where I created this column of death that they had to go down, and it really messed him up. So I got such a big kick out of that, and I really started thinking deeply about how to set up these encounters and use my set top, to make it look really fun and interesting. And then we go online, and I'm like, I can't do that anymore. And for a while, yeah. I even like set up a tripod, and I had my phone on the tripod while we were Zoom calling, and I pointed it at the map, and then it's me like pointing to this and that and saying, where do you want to move them? And it didn't work out. So the biggest change I had to make was being able to walk away and say, all right, we're going to do narrative, pure narrative, what I think you call theater of the mind, purely narrative approach. And except for the very last session, we did end up using Owlbear Rodeo.
Yes.
The online resource. Now, it doesn't actually answer the topic, right? Because I think the topic was specifically asking about things like PDFs and digital resources, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, although I would say that relates. Yeah, and I mean, we had been talking in social channel about Owlbear Rodeo. Someone shared a picture of sort of your final encounter, and it looked like it looked like chaos, but a fun sort of chaos, right? You could just see there was all these different factions going on, and there was the big bad guy, and all that. Yeah, so I think like that, those sort of mapping things are pretty interesting. Although I think at this point, like everybody has their favorites, or they know what they want to do with that. Yeah, so I guess when you're then going online, then did you do anything for like character sheets and stuff like that was different?
We already did digital character sheets. So that was I've got 3 campaigns going on, so I can't keep track of all of it. And some of them definitely wanted help with their character sheet. So we were doing digital character sheets anyways. So that there was no shift there. But what about you two? Andy, I know you're big into Roll20, right? For online resources.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm big into it. I but it's the tool I've been using during the pandemic times. I guess the pandemic period with the forced shift for a lot of online gaming has made me think about digital RPG like rule books and resources in a different way. Like for years or decades, like everybody else, I hope, I've been, accumulating this library of, game book PDFs, from like Drive Through RPG and other places. And until last year, those mainly served as an alternate way for me to read a book I already had, or as a way to get a book I was interested in and wanted to check out, but didn't want to invest the full cost of the big full color hardcover or something like that. So it was the game PDFs kind of felt like an extra luxury, I suppose, compared to just the good old physical stuff. But I had a moment of realization prepping my Alien game last year. I was trying to go all in on Roll20 and make use of its mapping and other features, and I realized how hard that was to do with just the game PDF. The irony here is days or weeks after I ran my game, they released a full digital asset pack for Alien on Roll20. But when I was setting up my game, that wasn't there, and so I was combing through the PDF, taking screenshots and grabbing images out and making tokens out of them and trying to pull the maps out of the PDFs and stuff like that.
Wait, Andy, you did all that yourself?
I did, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I played in this game, so I'm going to toot your own horn for a second. You did an amazing job with that. I assumed that you had bought a map pack from somewhere.
Oh, no. No,
Okay.
That was a lot of hours cropping images and things like that. And I mean, I've been going on for too long here, but I guess long story short, the pandemic and the shift online has made me realize there is a lot of opportunity for game companies, game creators to really embrace the kind of new online gaming environment, and just plain old PDFs feel like the absolute minimum effort these days. That's not to critique game companies, because I realize there's a ton of work to create all these assets, but I don't even know where I'm going with this, but that's my current relationship with like PDFs and digital resources. I've got all these PDFs, but now I'm kind of like looking askance at them, because what I really want is, a bunch of images and maps and tokens that I can import into my whatever Roll20 or whatever other tool I'm using. And when I do see that, it gets me really excited about a game, and I do see more of that. I do see more of that sort of thing from publishers. But like, any reactions to that? Have you guys had a similar experience where suddenly, like, just a plain old PDF doesn't look so cool anymore?
Yeah, as you were talking, it really a light bulb just went off, because the campaign that I ran that with the longest online was the Blades in the Dark one, and so I would end up having like 3 PDFs open. So one was sort of like a quick start rules thing that I could quickly reference a flow chart of how things happen. Another was like a character sheet reference, and then the other one was actual PDF of the book. And then I had a physical copy of the book open as well on my desk. And then on top of that, then we had Roll20 open, and that's where all the character sheets and stuff were happening.
Yeah.
So it ended up being this like vastly more complicated setup, but then it felt like I could quickly get information. I don't know if that was true or not, but it certainly felt like I was doing something more efficiently that way. But yeah, the PDF at that point really just became like a full text searching thing at that point. But the meat of what I was using was the Roll20 character sheet, right? It's like, like you have this amazing digital tool available to you that automatically can track stress and, track experience and things like that over the course of a whole campaign that you would typically be doing on a piece of paper in some fashion. But then, and then the rules then are just sort of a reference, and it's like, I mean, great, I have the PDF, but without this character sheet, I wouldn't be able to play the game at all.
And to be sure, like, searchable text of the rules is like a requirement, I think, for running a game online. So it's good if all you have is a PDF that you can do a full text search on. I mean, that's still good. Like, you're ahead of the game there.
I use technology all day long in my job. I work in tech industry, and I love something about not doing that when I'm playing games. However, I do the published adventures I do have them digitally, and it has been convenient to be able to just grab the image right out of there. Right, that's absolutely been convenient. And being able to click and search through is okay. I really like having the physical books as much as possible. And at the beginning, I really tried to not. Like, I was going to print off anything I needed ahead of time, and then I could just flip back and forth and put things up on my DM screen or whatever. And I think that I had to shift and realize that, this is just part of the resources now that I probably just need to get used to, that there will be a computer out on the table.
Was there a time when, so I felt bad for you just hearing you relate that how much you love setting up these gorgeous tactical miniature terrain things. I felt bad for you, the idea of like shifting to theater of the mind from that. Was there a time when you thought about like, I'm gonna invest in one of these online tools that recreates, like that has battle maps and all that stuff?
I think at least 3 times. Yes. I probably have files saved on my hard drive somewhere from at least 3 different attempts.
So why didn't they stick?
Where I realized that the level of effort I needed to put in to get it to the point I wanted it, with like the ability to do fog of war and things like that it was not fun for me. Because it was so similar to like some of the work that I do for a living to be paid and such. Whereas like when I'm painting miniatures, that's like completely outside of my my normal, kind of things I do. So that was for me the main reason I didn't. And then I ended up using it for this very last session because I knew that it was going to be a very battle intense, and I wanted as much immersion possible. So I did that one map. I did block out the different areas that they could or couldn't see that one time. And I think that were I to be running it in the future, I think that I will have those prepared for any major encounters where I want the where I want accurate positioning to be important to the story, right? Because I think that you can get a lot of bang for your buck with narrative approaches. You certainly don't need it. If there's like, oh, there's 5 of you, 5 of them, let's just call them, Fred, George, all of the Weasley names, right?
Yeah.
And then, you take them off one by one. I think you can get a lot of bang for your buck out of doing that.
So here's a question for both of you guys. So we should probably think towards wrapping it up here. What is one thing that like a game publisher could do, as far as digital resources go, that that most of them don't do, but that would really help you out?
Well, I think you answered the question already, because what you were saying, if I'm going to publish a game and I want people to play it online, right? Then what I should do is I should release with, at the same time that I'm releasing that published, whatever, also the digital pack. Like, oh, here's your tokens and your preloaded maps. And if that's appropriate for the game, then I think you want, like, on day one to be like, oh, yeah, bam, we're hitting the ground with that running. Because also, I know people hate buying the same thing multiple times.
Yeah.
Right? And, like, if I were to release a game for $30 and a digital resource pack for $20 2 months later, people would be mad. But if I were to release a $50 bundle of game and all of the digital resources on day one, people are like, oh yeah, it's more expensive, but now I've got everything I need. And right, because there's definitely psychology to buying.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing I would, my amateur advice would be for them.
It is a huge drag. I'm not knocking on like D&D Beyond or anything like that, but it is. It really deflates my enthusiasm when I have my shiny D&D hardcover and I want to run it online, but I've got to like buy it again on D&D Beyond, and then if I want to run it on Roll20, I guess I could buy another package of tokens or whatever. There's got to be a better way to do this. I understand why it is the way it is right now, but someone in our someone in chat outside of the show recently, we were sharing some stats that like Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds or one of these other services had shared about like online usage, and you saw this huge spike of online games being created right at the beginning of the pandemic, and then it started to there was a dramatic slump off like a month or so later, and I might surmise I surmise that was when people realize that there's a lot of work that goes into running an online game. But then a little while later, the graph started going up again, much more steadily. And I am truly curious, as we maybe see some light at the end of the pandemic horizon, if just like gaming has permanently shifted, its center of mass online, or if we're all gonna go back to our tabletop games, once this is done. Do you guys have a sense of that? Like, what about your games? Like, as soon as the pandemic lifts and it's safe to do so, Tim, are you going right back to face-to-face gaming, or is there something that was there some, I don't know. And Chris, I'd like to hear your answer too.
I have a yes, no, and a maybe. So my the adult group for the campaign I just wrapped, everyone has expressed interest, and as soon as everyone is fully vaccinated, that yes, we are back in person. The kids group, we still don't know when a kids vaccine is going to be out, right? So that's going to stay online for sure. And then I have a work group that I do once a week. And
you GM a lot of games, just
yeah.
Well, the work group is great because it's 50 minutes once a week, right? Yeah. So I do one day of one session of prep, and I'm good for a month and a half, right? So and it's really wonderful, and there's mostly new players there too, which is great. Well, I guess half and half. But so that one will be whenever it's reasonable to do in person. But I suspect it's going to be always have some aspect of remote.
Yeah.
How about you, Chris? Can you answer that real quick? I know we're hitting up on our time.
Yeah. I think the quick answer is I don't really like playing online, so as soon as I can play in person, we'll be shifting to that. Like you all were mentioning, getting tokens and maps and stuff like that, and my brain just checks out almost immediately when it comes to trying to put that together. I think because like you, Tim, right? I work in tech, and like I've done a lot of like acquiring assets and getting them organized and saving them out and stuff for like a professional thing, and I just don't really want to do that right with my hobby. And then for me also just running games is a lot about the interpersonal sort of reactions and interactions and stuff like that. So just that's where I'm at, although I also have a baby, so that makes scheduling hard, and being able to just jump online is quite a bit easier. So I will continue to play in games like that for sure. But...
And Andy, you have to answer.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to getting back to face-to-face gaming, but it's been a confidence booster for me in the last 6 months to see that online gaming. Alien game went pretty well. My Band of Blades game online is going pretty well. It's been a confidence booster, and it, you can capture that magic online. Mm-hmm. It does take extra, for me at least, it takes extra effort to get those maps and tokens and things like that, but I do think it pays off, and it is a different beast than face-to-face gaming, and it's got some pluses and minuses, but I don't know. I imagine that I see myself like mostly doing face-to-face, but maybe having an online like game going in the background most of the time. I don't know. That would feel good to me.
All right. Well, Tim, before we let you go, we need to do the last thing, which is replace the topic that you rolled.
Yep.
So I'm looking at the table, actually, and I think we did a refresh, and you were the only one who has another topic on the table. So you'll have two on there pretty soon. So do you have anything that you've been thinking about that would be a fun conversation?
I do. I would like to learn about saying no.
Okay.
As the GM, when should you say no? And then if you're willing to push your guest, when did you say yes that you should have said no? Right? Because there's always this theory that it should be yes and all the time. Mm-hmm. But I think that there's sometimes value added in saying no. And and I ask this because in this campaign there are two specific cases, and we're out of time so we can't talk about it, where I should have said no, and I wish I had.
Yeah. Huh. Oh, that's good. We're going to have to have a warning up front. Anybody who's played with the GMs who are talking on that episode should just turn it off. Run away. They don't want to hear the stories.
Yeah.
All right. Tim, thank you. This was really great. I really appreciate it. So I've been Chris Salzman.
I've been Andy Rao.
I'm Tim Saucer.
Remember, if your players are having fun, you're a great GM.